Well, after a week off, we're kicking off November on the channel, and for the second time, we're going to be doing a Clint Eastwood film. As at the channel point's request of Quaid, we're going to look at Gran Torino, released in 2008. Gran Torino is classified as a drama film, and Clint Eastwood directed, produced, and starred in the film. It was also actually his first starring role in 4 years since Million Dollar Baby in 2004. The movie was a family affair as well, as his oldest son Kyle Eastwood provided the score for the film. And family really is the theme here, as Eastwood stars as Walt Kowalski, who's a recently widowed Korean War veteran. Walt is stubborn, racist, and just overall angry at the world, which has alienated him from the rest of his family. However, he ends up meeting and bonding with a Hmong teenager named Tao and his sister Sue. And in fact, this was the first ever American film to feature a predominantly Hmong American cast. For those unaware, the Hmong people are a sub-ethnic group of the Miao people who originated from central China. And the Hmong American population largely originated from refugees who fled Laos during the Vietnam War due to an agreement with the CIA. Eastwood selected 10 Hmong lead actors and supporting actors for this film, and only one of them was not a first-time actor. The film received positive reviews from critics, and on a budget of around $30 million, made back $270 million, which, not adjusting for inflation, is Eastwood's most successful film. But what exactly went down with Walt and the Hmong people? Well, we're going to find out right now as we look at Gran Torino, released in 2008. So our film begins at a funeral for Dorothy Kowalski, widowing her husband Walt after 50 years of marriage. We very quickly learn that Walt is intolerant to the world and people who aren't like him, and he's looked down upon by his family. After the funeral, a young pastor named Father Janovich tries to get Walt to come to confession, as he promised his wife that he would. Due to his age, however, and perceived arrogance, Walt doesn't think much of him at all. Next door to Walt lives a Hmong family, including a teenager named Tao and his sister Sue. Tao is harassed and pressured by a gang led by his cousin who calls himself Spider. Spider wants Tao to roll with them, and his initiation will be stealing Walt's prized Gran Torino. Meanwhile, Father Janovich is still persistent on getting Walt to confession and follows him to a bar. They have a conversation where Walt tells the father that he doesn't think he knows too much about life and death and explains what those things mean. The father counters after hearing the explanation that Walt knows a lot about death, but not a lot about life, which Walt has to agree. That night, Walt hears a rustling in his garage and grabs a rifle to find Tao trying to steal his car. Walt accidentally falls over, however, and Tao's able to escape. Walt spends the next day polishing his car, and that night, Spider's gang shows up at Tao's house to try to take him with them. This starts a big fight between Tao, Sue, Tao's family, and the gang, which Walt breaks up by pointing his rifle at the gang. They fuck off, and the next morning Walt opens the door to find a bunch of food and flowers at his doorstep as a thank you from the Hmong people. Walt tells them that you don't need to do this, just stay off my fucking lawn. Later that day, Sue is walking down the street with her boyfriend Trey, who, fun fact, is played by Clint Eastwood's other son, Scott. They're then harassed by 3 dudes who make unwanted advances on Sue until Walt shows up and points a gun at them. He takes Sue home in his car and learns a little bit about the Hmong people, and even though he's still majorly racist, they try to bond a little bit. On Walt's birthday, his son comes over and brings him some gifts, and then suggests that Walt go into a retirement home, which makes him very angry. Sue then convinces Walt to come next door to a family barbecue, which Walt does, even though he's very awkward. Walt does his best to mingle, but then has a coughing fit, and Sue notices him cough up blood on his hand. The next day, Sue, Tao, and their mother go over to Walt's place and ask him to give Tao some work as repayment for Tao trying to steal his car. And having a young able-bodied hand at his disposal, Walt uses this opportunity to have Tao clean up the whole neighborhood over the course of the next week or so. Walt is still coughing up blood, so he decides to go to the doctor, and while we don't see exactly what the prognosis is, it's not looking very good. Walt then takes to mentoring Tao and gives him some tools to help do some things around the house. He also sells Tao an old freezer at a discount after Tao helps him bring it up the stairs. Sometime later, while Tao is doing his garden, he asks Tao what he wants to do in life, and Tao has no idea. Walt then suggests he could help him get a job in construction, as he has some connections. And after doing just that, Walt takes him to the store and buys him a tool belt and other things he'll need for the job, letting him borrow his tools as he needs as well. Things are going well for Tao now, or at least they were, as on his way home from work one day, he's jumped by Spider's gang. After Walt finds out about this, Walt goes over to Spider's house and jumps one of the gang members in retaliation. A while later at a barbecue, Walt also tells Tao that he can take the Gran Torino to work if he wants, so he'll be safer. However, that night, Spider's gang does a drive-by shooting on Tao's house, in which he is injured, and also Sue is missing. They wait around for Sue all night and she eventually shows up, very badly beaten and very badly raped. That night, after he punches up his house, Walt is confronted by Father Genovich, who tells Walt that the family's not going to talk to the police. He knows Walt wants to do something, but he begs him not to get himself killed. Speaking of which, Tao comes over the next day furious and demands action from Walt. Walt convinces him, however, that they need a plan, so he tells Tao to go home until 4 o'clock. And then Walt goes about his day. He does his lawn, he smokes inside the house for the first time, he gets a shave and a haircut, and for the first time ever, he buys a new suit. And then he finally goes to confession with Father Genovich, where he confesses that he wishes he had made more time for his family. It's now 4 o'clock and Tao returns to Walt's house as he's prepping his rifle. He takes Tao down to the basement and shows him the silver star that he got in Korea before blocking him in the basement. He explains to Tao that he got that star for killing an elderly soldier who is just trying to surrender, which he thinks about every day, and he's not going to let Tao make himself into a killer. He then leaves his dog Daisy at Tao's house and calls Sue on the phone, telling her where the key is to let Tao out of the basement. Walt then goes over to the house of Spider's gang again to confront them. They all point their guns at him and he goes into his coat for one himself, at which point they all shoot him multiple times, killing him. It's then revealed that he was actually going into his shirt for his lighter, and that he was unarmed. Tao and Sue arrive on the scene to see Walt dead, and that the whole gang has been arrested, as there is witnesses this time, the surrounding members of the community. A few days later, they attend Walt's funeral, where Walt's family is very surprised to see so many Hmong Americans there. And during the will reading, it's revealed that Walt has left his house to the church, and he has left the Gran Torino to Tao. And also Walt's dog Daisy as well, as they ride off in the car into the sunset to end the film. So the biggest thing you might be interested in, and one thing I didn't talk about at the beginning, is what was the reaction from the Hmong people about their portrayal in this movie. On all accounts, it seems to be mixed. On one hand, there was a very positive response to Hmong Americans being featured in a major American film. On the other hand, the portrayal of their culture had many inaccuracies and perceived stereotypes within the film. Some Hmong Americans were also not happy with the racism portrayed in the film. It also, of course, can maybe be classified as another white savior film as well. But to be fair, that's also kind of Eastwood's gimmick, so I don't know what you expected from a film made by Clint Eastwood. As far as Eastwood's performance goes, I think he did a very good job portraying a racist old white man. He even looked the part as well. Not saying that's what he's actually like, I honestly don't know much about him as a person, but he looks the part. And while yes, you can just look at it as a white savior film, you can also look at it as a tale of a crazy racist old man who overcomes his racism and sacrifices himself for a people he previously hated. Which also might just be another way of saying white savior film, but you know. I think the acting from the Hmong Americans was very good in this film as well, surprisingly good as well considering again, all of them except for one had zero acting experience previously. Special shout out to B. Veng, as this is really the only film he's ever made, and he did a very good job in it as Tao, especially in the emotional scenes. And as a Hmong American, if you want his opinion of the film, he said last year that he does not regret doing the film, but he thinks that the film could not be made in today's current day and age, at which he might be right. So would I recommend this movie? Well, if you're a fan of Eastwood films, yeah, this is a classic Clint Eastwood film, and maybe his best modern film, to be honest. However, going back to that point of not being able to be made today, if you're someone very offended by racist terms and overall racism, and not able to distinguish, film from reality, well, maybe this is not the film for you. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for my review of Gran Torino. Thank you again, Quaid, for using your points on this. Next week, we'll be back with the horror genre, shocker I know, with Lake Placid. But that's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the video description down below. With all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been my review of Gran Torino, released in 2008, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.